Hello.
Uh,
Hello.
Thank Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. Um, Hazen.
hey,
So I think we can start, but let me share the agenda. So, hello everyone. Welcome to RPC Standard Call 21. Um, we I wasn't here during the last call, and although I went through the call summary, and I did map out this file, this HMD proposal for the versioning that we talked about. We've been talking about since the beginning of this year. I don't know if anyone had taken a look at it and have any suggestion or input on it. Hello, Felix.
Hello. Yeah, I have taken a look at it. I think it makes a lot of sense. The basic question is just how we exactly pull off the versioning, but we had some thoughts on it. So the way it should work is that GitHub release has to be created of the V1, and we can basically do that at any time.
Okay. Thank you for that. So, um, Hello. Sorry, I don't know
Hello.
what happened. Sorry, my I don't know what's wrong with my internet connection. So as I was saying, I'm not sure who we are going to contact for, like who will be responsible for the GitHub release. So I'm not sure if that will be you,
I mean,
because
at the
apparently
moment,
you didn't.
it's gonna be me, yeah. So I can. The question is mainly, I mean, you listed some things there which are kind of still to include, I guess. So we should
Yeah,
get to these PRs, and then we have
yeah.
to see, yeah.
This PR actually, this one and this one. Although this is like, I'm not sure about the second one, but yeah. Then also this PR needs to be discussed. This add max use gas here.
Yeah, that last one is kind of a. I think it's more like a change to the API. I mean, it makes it whatever the status of it is. I think it has to go through the process first. So I wouldn't just include it in the V1 because it is supposed to be. We are supposed to agree on the API changes before deploying them to the spec. And so I feel like this change with the max use gas is more like at the start of the process. So it is being implemented as far as I see in Reth, but it still has an open pull request, and there's also an open pull request in Go Ethereum. but that's about it. So I think it's not at the point where it can be included into the spec, and it shouldn't be considered for this initial release of the spec.
Okay, okay. I'm trying to jot that down so that I can know what to include and remove from your review. So is there any other thing you think that should be included from your own perspective, apart from the things I've listed?
I'm not so super sure. No, I don't think. I mean, to be honest, it's just more about getting started with the release process in the first place, so that we can uh, see what comes next. Because as far as I see it, with this, like with the release process, what's going to happen is we will make a release of the spec, but then ultimately the point of that is also to freeze the spec at its current place, giving clients the ability to target the released version for their tests. So we will, in the next step, have to update the test runner so that it will use the released version of the spec instead of the latest one. So I think that's something important as well that is connected with this release process. And for that, I would just say, I mean, if we just freeze the spec as it is right now, we have a pretty good chance of making it useful for the clients to target. Unless some client sees that there are certain changes in the spec that are required in order for them to pass the test, in which case we should just make these changes. But it's also, once we have released the version 1, we will keep making new releases all the time. So I think it's more like, it's not that important to get everything into the initial release, because literally it's not the last release.
Yeah, what I was just going for was like maybe the important ones to start with, then we can slowly add up to the release.
So one change that definitely has to be made is that recently we added the block timestamp to the transaction object. So that thing needs to still be deployed into the tests. I'll see what's the pull request for this. I think there is an open pull request for this. Let me check for it. Yeah, so the pull request was merged, but somehow the tests are not updated. So I have to update the tests again to include this change. And this will be something that we have to do before the release. Because one of the ideas was also that as part of the release, we will publish the spec JSON, but we will also publish the tests which are associated with that version as an artifact. So we basically have to come up with so before we can publish the version 1, we have to make sure that there are no regressions in the tests. And at the moment, looking at the Hive, we have a regression in tests because most of the clients are returning this block timestamp as part of the transaction, but the tests themselves do not have this change included yet. So we have to make this change to get all the clients back to 100, like all the clients which were passing 100% before, Nethermind and Geth, we have to get them all back to this state. Actually, let me check. I think Aragon is also at a similar, Aragon is at the same place now. So if we put it back, then Aragon will also be at 100%. So basically, I will make this change to ensure that they all pass again, and then we can we are in a good place for the tests.
Okay, so I'll still try to jot this down so that we don't kind of forget about it. And I'm not sure if anyone has any other thing to say in regards to the versioning. Any more input so that we can go to the next agenda item.
I would like to give one more thing. So ultimately, we also have to figure out how the versioning will be handled in the documentation side. So at the moment, the documentation website shows the latest spec, but we should have a way of basically browsing the spec as it was released. And so we have to figure out how to make that happen. I think there is some work required in the GitHub Actions or something that will basically publish the latest released spec as well as the like the latest one.
Okay.
Or should we
I'm not
maybe
sure.
publish all of the documentation sites for all of the versions? I mean, that would be the ideal case, right? If we had some kind of version selector in the docs where you could say, I want to go to the
Yeah.
version 1 or version
Yeah.
1 or so. But this has to be implemented by someone.
Okay. So I think I would defer this to Zane because he has like more knowledge about how the website works now. If he can like give us a direction on how to properly do this, or I
Yeah,
can still pick it up
just
on my own end.
yeah, just give me like 1 second to like switch over to my machine. I'm just
Okay.
like setting up my mic on it. That's why you see two of me. Just like one
All
more
right.
second.
But I think the second idea makes sense so that people can like easily illustrate through the various versions that with maybe more like a history.
Let's see.
Okay, Zane.
Hey, how's it going? Off the top of my head, I would say like probably what you could do. I don't know if this makes total sense, but essentially any sort of markdown that you put into the docs folder would then just be replicated. Probably your biggest thing would be on the sidebar. So you could probably, because it is just Docusaurus, is have a sidebar, and then you could just generate the docs either in Markdown or MDX, because the generator can be run as a standalone CLI. And then for there, you'd be able to have like on the sidebar, say like V1, V2, V3, and then expand into it. And then latest would just be the default. And then versioning in terms of version number can just go directly into the docs, I think.
Hey, Zane. So, somewhat a new question here, but do you mind, or someone, whoever has on hand, linking to the site you're referencing, or you're referring to? Mercy, I mean, you mentioned this before, but yeah, I'm relatively new here, just trying to get more context,
Okay,
just so I can
let me
understand.
share the
Oh,
link.
right on. Oh, to the GitHub? Oh, never mind. Okay, got it. Appreciate it.
So yeah, I mean, I would say that this sidebar thing, I'm not super sure about it. So basically, this would mean that inside of the guides section or something, we would have. I mean, yeah, we can have something there, but I would rather make it so that we basically have to change the site to have some kind of version selector in the top. This is a
No,
very common thing actually for most documentation sites, that you can switch between the versions. And how exactly we implement that, we have to see, but it has to be like a built-in feature of the site with like a that goes in basically in the top bar.
yeah, that's fine. I was just saying that like that was quick. We're like we want to ship something that like works, that doesn't take like a whole heck of a lot of time or engineering resources to do, then you could like do that. And then that would like probably just like work today. The other thing would be is that it is just Docusaurus and that all the docs are generated with like regular .mdx that's not tied to like any sort of platform. So in that case, yeah, I'm sure there's a Docusaurus plugin that allows you to have like a little drop down menu and all that stuff. So uh, yeah, it's just Docusaurus. The answer
Okay.
is it's Docusaurus, and there's a generator CLI that will produce the documents that you need. It doesn't like forcibly put you into any sort of arrangement. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like that's some work that we could take up, but like we'd have to discuss that like sort of like offline, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so there is a guide here that will explain this, like how they like to have it in this in the in the tool. So yeah, I mean, the main thing for us is that we want to have this integrated um with the release process. So ultimately, this comes down to documenting also the release process, like how we publish a release. And I see us publishing releases more often than, like every year. I mean, we're definitely going to do this process quite a bit. So
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, we kind of want to, yeah, we want to have the versioning, but so far also it's been the case that people, when stuff is changed in the API, people want to have that on quite quickly. It doesn't really help anyone if we have a stable version and then we're not really in a position to update it like frequently. So,
Yeah, for sure. So I would just recommend using GitHub Actions to then call the CLI to build the docs in the right place.
mhm.
In terms of like, oh, we have this release, new release, boom, it goes into a particular folder and that's it. I think the other thing that we were thinking about originally was that, oh, okay, like you're probably gonna have one doc, so it's potentially that you could start like get ignoring the folder and then have that all be generated sort of behind the scenes. So that's like potentially a possibility. So that way, like things are not just like ever expanding. Um,
Yeah, but I think the ever expanding part is not really like that. So we
okay.
have this the in currently in the execution APIs there is also a like GitHub Pages branch, and that one contains the generated docs. And so I mean it does kind of like we already have the auto deployment set up there, right?
No. So like
No?
the GH pages changed between versions. So now it uses GitHub Actions pages. So GitHub Actions pages like puts the docs
Oh.
parallel to the actual like process itself. So there is a checked-in version of the docs themselves that reflect the current state. Different consumers like MetaMask and Infura from times before had problems where people were not able to really figure out like what's going on with the docs or make suggestions for edits. So it was useful for them to be able to visualize that at a glance and say like, oh, it's this line here. We don't like this kind of markdown, even though the markdown's generated from the descriptions within inside of the methods.
Okay. I'm
Yeah.
still not really sure. So do you know, I'm sorry. Can you tell me where is the current? Let's actually just check this.
Yeah, sure. One second.
Okay. Yeah, so we have we have a deploy to GitHub Pages
Yeah.
action.
Yeah. So GitHub workflows. Then you look at deploy.yaml, and then you'll see this. Uh, Let me just pull this up real quick. But
Yeah. Yeah.
so that's the deploy to the YAML, and so between V2 and V4. So many years ago, GitHub Actions was new, and it would require you to have a GH Pages branch, and the GH Pages branch would then like do the deploy, and then that would use Docusaurus and all this other stuff. But GitHub just like got rid of all of that, so you could just basically use GitHub Actions to deploy pages without needing like a separate branch and branch management and all of that stuff.
Yeah, but so where does thanks for giving me the tutorial about that, but where is this?
Docs API and then API, and that has all of the stuff. So it looks like
Yeah.
this. And that's like where the methods are, and then they get generated. So like this is supposed to just be so that way, like, okay, let's say that you are from the UX perspective, someone that's
Yeah, mostly, sorry,
non-technical,
my
but
question was a different one.
oh, what
Basically,
is
in order for us to build, mostly, I think I'm not that familiar with this like way of deploying GitHub pages, which is just doesn't use the repository itself as a kind of storage for the files. So I was just mostly curious, like, where do the actual like files live that are deployed to the GitHub pages? Like, is there a
okay.
branch?
So line 44 of the deploy, it's called like upload artifact, and then
Mm-hmm.
actions upload pages artifact, and it says with build. So in the background, npm run build docs creates a build directory
Yeah.
and the staging area of the CI. And then from there, it will copy that where you see on line 44 actions upload pages artifact with the
Yeah.
build. And then that is where the pages actually live. And
Yeah.
then on GitHub and the background, I don't know if they just like throw it on their own like data center or they take that where it says it needs like the build, and then that's like where the built artifacts live and are hosted by GitHub.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to get at is that if we actually want to use the versioning feature from Docusaurus, we
Mm-hmm.
need to have some place that contains all of the versions, and
Yep.
they all have to be in the same. So we basically have to keep adding to that storage. It's not like we cannot fully overwrite the pages storage every time. We have to check out the current version of the pages and modify it. So at that point, it might make sense to switch back to this like GitHub pages as a branch
I
approach.
I actually don't think it does.
Okay.
From my perspective, the thing that you would do, you could write your tooling script in any sort of language you want, in like shell script, or you could write it in TypeScript, or you could write it in Go. But I would then just like for that, I would simply not use the npm run build docs. Uh, Trying to figure out like what's the script that's running again, and the package JSON. Do do do. So let's see. Make build. Blah, blah, blah. So there's the make build script, and then the build is in source scripts. I'm just looking for the proper thing, but you don't need to do all of that because again, underneath the hood, it's all just like scripts. And we have the CLI. So the only thing you would do is download the GitHub releases. We actually have done this in the past with like our meta schema, which we're moving away from, but you can use the GitHub API to get the release versions that you want or get all of the releases. Then you build the docs by calling the CLI on that directory. That directory then produces the markdown, and then you can just have that output into the build in the file location that Docusaurus likes.
I understand. But then basically this means that on every single build, we have to download all of the past releases and then like build it that way. But what I meant is that if we were to use this GitHub pages as a branch approach, we can just check out the current version of the docs, add something to it, like make the necessary modifications, and then also commit that, which is actually going to make it way easier to see the changes that are created by the build. Whereas in the other way, it's kind of like we're treating it more like the deployment is basically going to be this thing that we cannot really inspect too well. I mean, you can run it locally, I guess, but it's
Yeah, so
it's not really the same. So anyway, let's cut it
yeah,
short.
just
I
cut it
think
short. Yeah,
there
there's
are
a
some
way.
there are some stuff to figure out for this build that is going to make it possible to host like all the versions simultaneously of the docs, and basically it comes with some update to the GitHub Pages build, however we do it, but this update has to be developed in order to make this happen, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it could be developed. The other approach is to just generate the versions into the current repo, which is like also an approach that would also give you the same caching.
Yeah.
But it just depends on like how you feel about that, etc. And then the other thing about that is only the files that are changing will then update the docs. So if you were to go to like one, well, not quite because on the versions then you have it checked in. So maybe a branch approach is like a good approach. And like, I don't know. So
I mean, we'll figure it out anyways. Okay, so this is like the basically in order to fully finish this API versioning topic, we have to update the docs build to be aware of the versioning. And I think that's that's kind of a slightly bigger task, but I'll find someone to do this, so that's fine. I just wanted to mention that for me, this kind of comes with the versioning. I mean, we can make a GitHub release with the V1 API, but it doesn't really help anyone. That's mostly what I wanted to mention here. I mean, the main thing this does is then ultimately we're going to create that GitHub release very soon. In the immediate next step, we're going to update the tests to be running on top of this version, which is going to make it easier for the clients. And we will have some kind of method for running both the latest tests and the latest release tests. And then in the third step, we're going to look into updating the docs build to be aware of the versions. So this is the summary.
Okay, noted. Thank you very much.
uh,
Um,
I was gonna say I had one other question for Felix. Felix, for the test files on the .ios, would it be useful for you if the .io files were a part of the docs, and then went through the same sort of validation as the rest of the methods? Because like I think right now it's like, oh, if you generate this .io, but it doesn't actually correspond to the methods, it essentially is like a possibility.
No. We check. There is a job that actually checks the IO files for
Yeah,
validity.
like
So that's
spec
that.
check, right? But you wouldn't need spec check potentially if the .io files were already in the doc, because that would be self-validating with the validation of the tools potentially. That's like a route, but
I
I'm
don't think
happy to
this is
take that.
really related too much. Basically, I think we are going to be releasing the tests as part of the. We're going to be releasing the tests as part of the version release as well. So the release is going to contain the openrpc.json file and the tests that are matching that version. So that's how I see it for now. And then we'll see where to go from there.
okay. The next, I don't know, Samus, do you have any updates in regards to the error code standardization? And
Hey, yeah. I saw the comment from Felix. I looked into it. I have a few questions. It's not questions. I understand Felix's point of view. My hesitation is we will lose the native validation functionality for error groups if we don't embed the X error groups, the extension specification within the JSON. So I wanted to just get some opinion from Felix. What's the reservation here and how we can address it?
Yeah, mostly, I mean, from my point of view, it's just that we decided to recreate the spec build functionality because we see it as more like an easier way for us forward to just be in control of the YAML input format in the repository. And so it's just kind of, that was like the main motivation for us to make these changes. And I think when it comes to the error codes, I sort of understand this X error groups stuff, but at the same time, yeah, I mean, I just feel like I don't know, it just makes the spec more complicated in some way. So
Yeah, yeah.
if we will, I mean,
Uh-huh.
I have no problem with like labeling the errors as groups, but to be honest, I don't think anyone really cares about these groups too much. Like for people, I mean, mostly what we've been looking for is a way to just have like error codes defined at all for the standard
Right,
methods. And
right.
so for me, this is kind of the more important thing. And
Yeah, yeah.
with regard to the like groups, we have to see. I mean, we can update our tool to support this error group stuff, and then it will
Right.
just be in the spec. Like that's
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. I don't think there's like any issue with this.
Mhm.
It's just that, yeah, well, I mean, we have to make this update. So that's the main thing. So I would say this
Understand.
is like the next step is basically we have to implement support for the errors inside of our tool. However we do it, basically it has to be implemented.
Right, right. Yeah, I saw you move the scripts from JavaScript to Go. Yeah, I think I should definitely do it because I wanted to make sure if I'm doing the right way of doing it, so we don't have to re-implement everything. Because one of your the concerns were we're still using references and it's not flattened, but it's already dereferenced, it's already flattened. I can actually show the generated generated OpenRPC file. Okay, let me just share for one moment,
Yeah, it's fine.
if that would make it easier.
No, I mean, maybe we just misunderstood each other. So we generate two versions of the spec right now. We have one file that we generate is called refs-openrpc.json, and that one
Correct.
includes all of the references. So
Correct.
basically, it doesn't have any of this like JSON post-processing. And then we
Right.
have another version of the spec, the openrpc.json, which is kind of a flattened version. So this one doesn't have any schemas defined, and all the
Exactly.
schemas are inlined into the methods in a specific way. And also
Yeah.
all of these like all off schema feature is processed by the tool. And
Yes, exactly. No, I definitely understand that. So we have two files. One is intermediary, the other one is the final one, flatten and dereference. The XR groups work exactly the same. In the non-dereference, which is the middle file, refs file, it has the refs, and the final OpenRPC, it is dereference. For example, if you see X error group, I don't know what method this is, but you can see it is all dereference. It doesn't hold any references and it has all the errors dereference. The only difference here is it doesn't use the errors, the typical errors. That's because it doesn't support arrays of arrays that's one. Second, that's the only change as far as the methods are concerned. So it is still pretty readable for the users. When they look at the spec, they'll know exactly what errors are supported per method. At the end, I have appended the extensions. Users don't need to worry about this at all. The only reason we kept the extensions here, we can actually remove it if you don't need it, because it's useless at this point for pretty much most folks. But the reason I still kept the X extensions, the spec itself within the dereferenced one, is because this now allows us to natively validate if any of the error messages or any error codes are violating the grouping. For example, if I specified, let's say, 799 for one of the error, I can natively validate without any extra validation tools using just OpenRPC validations to see if anyone has violated. Some developer tomorrow comes in and says, adds a number that doesn't fall within our ranges that we expect it to be, which can be easily validated without any additional coding or tooling to validate these ranges violations. That's the only reason I kept it here. But otherwise, it is pretty much exactly what we would expect the rest of the spec to be. Other than this, you won't see any other
maybe this is a quick comment
component.
there. It is, since this is kind of what I was trying to say, is that since we are now in control of this like translation step within our repository, we can
Yeah.
just create a tool that will check that the errors are right. We can do this check while we are building the spec. So we don't really need to embed this into the spec, because as far as we're concerned, we treat the spec as an output from the tool. So we will never worry that that late in the process, we will not worry about the invalidity of the spec anyways, because we expect that this translation tool from the YAML to the JSON can only produce a valid output. So it is supposed to basically it cannot create invalid spec content.
I see your point. Because if you remember, we had the RPC test gen, which is also consuming this downstream. Now this has been merged back into the same repo. Needed this validation because in RPC test gen, I can also enforce additional validations with this extension spec being written here. Now I have to take a look at this, how this RPC test gen will work and consume, because this allowed me to enable validations at multiple places. Kind of felt like a really niche side effect of having the extension specification, and also the documentation is built in. I don't have to worry about any modifications to the documentation, especially given there are too many errors per method now. It can. I don't know how it looks like now, but I think it'll have a good side effect of displaying this in the documentation to having it in a extension specification. But now, if you have to rewrite this to be in a pragmatic way, we'll have to worry about a lot of things like how we would do this validations in our RPC test gen, because then it'll be a lot of complicated hard-coded logic testing for these grouping, which I kind of hated, which was like built-in. Now, since this is an embedded, it's a built-in validation, which I liked the way how it did using the OpenRPC's scripts. Now, this means like writing ugly hard-coded grouping somewhere, which is
I don't
why I
understand it.
hesitate.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, what we want is ultimately we want the input to the spec generation process to be kind of easy to write. So there is going to be some YAML file that defines these error groups, right? I mean, you have that now probably.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So I mean, there is somewhere there is a file that contains these errors, and then this file, I mean, we basically have to process that, and we have to create anyway some code that will process this file to create the OpenRPC JSON output. Yeah. And I think during this process, we can apply any validation we want. For example, we can check.
No. I'm not talking about the validation while generating OpenRPC, which is already done anyway. But if someone is consuming this to make some modification or to generate test in any downstream applications, we can also
yeah, that is not supposed to happen though. Like nobody is supposed to like extend the spec which was published already. Like that, I'm not worried about this kinds of use cases at all. As far as we are concerned, we are producing the spec and it is what it is. Like we're not like concerned about someone modifying the spec that we have produced later, right? When would that be use case?
Actually, it doesn't. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I was going to say just even in RPC test gen, for example, it doesn't directly consume these error codes. For example, nonce to low error. Whatever the error that's returned by the get or whatever the client within the RPC test gen, we can also implement this if it falls out of range, which is side effect of again having the embedded grouping. But yeah. I do see your point how we can do it otherwise, but it just feels like an ugly implementation of or hard-coded implementation of validations in multiple places here.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I understand, like in RPC test gen, we're not really going to validate any of this. Like that's not really the point of it. Like RPC test gen is just supposed to capture the outputs from the clients. So we will have to implement.
Yeah.
We will have to implement some validation in the spec check tool for the errors. So in that case, what we have to do is we have to check that in the responses, they are using one of the error codes which is listed for the method. So again, this is not really related with the groups. It's just that the client is allowed for a specific method to return specific error codes. And there's a definitive list of error codes for each method that can be returned. And so the spec check tool at some point has to be extended to basically recognize the method and then recognize the set of allowable error codes. I don't really see how this is related with this, like inlining the extension schema into the openrpc.json, because in the openrpc.json, we have a list of errors which is allowed for each method, and we can just validate that in spec check.
Okay. I'll have to go back and check which tool where it's sat nicely. But I do see your point. I'm just worried about re-implementing all this again. It's been open for a really long time.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really have to do this. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the main thing I'm seeing is that this PR has been open for a long time. I recognize that it's a bit annoying, but we just took our time to figure out like the right way to do this. We can merge it as it is today, but I can tell you that there will be some changes to this thing ultimately to make it kind of like work for us. And
Yeah.
the way I see it, the main contribution in the error codes proposal is the list of the error codes themselves and also their association with the methods. So that's kind of how I see it. Like the precise way of like how these error codes are integrated into the spec, I don't think it's like the important part there. And I mean, definitely I or someone else at the F, we will be working on the tools to make it more supported or whatever, or apply more validations. Or, I mean, this is something that is definitely going to happen.
Yeah. No, I definitely want to provide my support. It's not just for the sake of merging it. Want to definitely see it through all the way. Let's hear from Zain. He helped implement the extension just for this. So
Well,
Zain,
not
please.
just for that, but still.
I mean, yeah, no, I'm sorry,
It's
the
just
other
like
way around.
the general extensions
Right.
framework. So the way that like we see extensions is a way of communicating, like docs is a way is communicating like downstream all the different people that consume it. So when you're talking about, well, like no one's going to really modify these docs, kind of in a way, I think downstream consumers have a hard time consuming the docs currently. Just kind of the way, because of the structure, I think because of the versioning that you were talking about, and the fact that things are not like well bundled together, so it makes it really hard to test. Um, and so like the way we saw the extensions is a way to allow people to do things that would be useful for the spec before we actually make those like mainline and say like, okay, this is definitively the way that everything's going to be done, so we don't like break people, and we also allow for a lot of flexibility. So with the X error groups and X error codes, those are things that we had discussed for a long time, and then we said, okay, we're going to make these like official, so they're supported by docs, categories, and all that stuff. But the main thing there is just like from the spec check perspective, like looking at the spec check code, there are a few things that are like not quite right about that. So like one is the JSON schema version that's supported is actually at odds with what's supported with OpenRPC itself. So the schema that's being validated is the wrong version. So that means that like certain patterns that are available in like JSON 2020 are not available in JSON draft 7. So that's like something to contend with. The other thing is that we're actually changing the meta schema types. So before we were a lot like looser with the typing, and so now we're a lot more tight. So that's like another thing. And then when it came to like sort of the .io files, so you've been talking about like bundling that with the release, and the release and the .io files are kind of separate, but then it's also bundling the entire like sort of package and sort of package infrastructure as well. So then you have to kind of use RPC test gen. There are companies out there like Infura that take the execution APIs like documentation, and then they use the OpenRPC test gen like native test coverage which then allows you to hit the RPC endpoints and then get back the responses, much like the .io file, but it uses the examples to then validate. So when a user is writing the doc, no matter like what it is that they're writing, it means that the validation for the doc goes through the same OpenRPC validations that's within schema utils. So it all automatically like aligns that the responses that you're expecting to get back are the same. And then the other sort of thing about that is it allows you to hit your live endpoints with it. So like let's say that you had an Aragon client, or let's say the Flashbots RPC API, then when you're making requests, you're able to validate that your responses then match the thing that's within the test. And so within the next like month, our team is actually scheduled to help like overhaul tests. So we would really actually like to meet with you, Felix. So that way we can figure out like what it is, the thing that you like sort of need, and like what would like work well. And like
Yeah,
we're not
I don't
opposed
really
to
understand
writing
the
things in Golang to like make those things like mesh with the vision of that. It's actually what we proposed like I don't know 7 months ago. It's like, hey, do you want this in Golang or what? So that's why I was saying that we should just meet with like clients and like you together to just figure out like, okay, what do you need OpenRPC to do and like sort of help you with, and then like how can we like sort of help make that happen? Because
Yeah, like
ultimately we
from
want
our
you
point of
to.
view, I mean, we don't really need anything right now, to be honest. Like that's the thing is, I mean, we have our own tool chain. I think we are pretty happy with it, to be honest. I don't think we have to change it. The main thing is there are these examples in the spec, but I think examples and tests are not the same, first
Yeah,
of all.
that's why
So
we want
that's
to add X test, which would be parallel to examples, which would then allow you to do like the testing flow that I think that you would like.
yeah, but the thing is that with these tests, it's not that easy. Like we have built our own infrastructure precisely because it has some it 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 has some requirements. And I mean, one of these requirements is that for the testing of the spec, you also need to make sure that you're running the tests against a very specific chain. Like you can't just like have an arbitrary example because you will never be able to verify the result. And that's the whole and then also in order to do your testing for certain methods is actually not possible to just directly compare the response. And that's like the whole thing. Like we have already kind of figured out like how to do our testing in a way that is like a good compromise. And I don't think that we really like I don't think there's like too much that can be improved with this. There is a separate project right now at the EF trying to come up with like a performance-oriented testing method, but this is also fully unrelated because again, for the performance testing, it has very different requirements from the conformance testing, which we are doing with these IO files. And so, I mean, from my point of view, I think our setup is pretty good, and I don't really see how it would have to be changed. Definitely, let's have that meeting. But yeah, I mean, I'm coming from a position where I think like we are pretty well covered. There are certain things that can be improved in these tools, like for example, the spec check tool could be improved a little bit, or I mean, we can always have more tests and like expand the coverage of the existing tests, or we can, yeah. But I think, for example, bundling the tests into the spec is, I don't see it as the correct approach, to be honest, because the tests are very specific to like the setup that we are using also with the test chain and everything. So then it's kind of like if you have these, like the tests standalone are kind of useless. They only really work together with all
With the
the other
chain
setup that we already have.
RLP that you have the historical state, so that way you can reproduce that from the perspective of like Geth, right? So it's like, oh, here's the chain state, and you can't do anything without the chain state, right?
Yeah, I mean, for the current test, we have a definitive chain that we use, and all of the clients are loading that specific chain. And then we have test vectors that match this specific chain. Yeah. And I mean, I'm pretty happy to go over it with you, like how it actually like all works if you want. But I think we have a really good setup that works really well. Like in terms of how companies could use this to test their endpoints, like in Fora, I'd be curious. Like I'm pretty sure they can just run the same setup that we have to test their own like software because it's written in a way that is very it is very reproducible. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, at some point, one of the things we're going to add to the testing is just like basically we're going to move the library that is the like interpreter of these IO files. We're probably going to move that into the Golang tools directory in the spec as well, so that people can just import it from there. And then it's like if you write your test in Go, you can basically also have the validation of the tests, like the way we do it in our conformance testing. And I think that's going to be another step that helps people if they want to be a downstream consumer of our tests. They can use this library or whatever. I don't know. Like that's how I see it.
Oh, cool,
So
cool.
I have a question. Won't this have an impact in Hive?
I mean, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, we have some what I was talking about just now is that there is code in Hive that interprets the tests and compares the results. And this is where ultimately the testing really happens. Like the test gen is just the creator of the test. It doesn't actually verify anything. The actual verification is done when these tests are executed against the client. And that code, like the code that actually runs it against the client and compares the result, we can move that back into the specification repository also. But it's still like ultimately we're still going to be running the tests in Hive, and we're not really going to change our approach, I think, for the conformance testing. It's just that the tools right now are a bit spread over multiple things. And I mean, the first thing we did is we have moved the test generation into the spec repository with the RPC test gen, and basically the running of the test will remain in Hive, but we can definitely make it easier for like external projects to run the tests in a similar way by at least providing a library that kind of makes it easier. Like that's how I see it.
Okay, so based on this, I don't know, are we still having discussion to further this, or do I need to open a trend so that we can have everything in a more compact form?
Sorry, I didn't catch the question really. Can you
No, I
clarify?
was asking Zane if because he was saying he wanted to talk to you and like clients. So I was asking if it will make sense to open a trend so that we will have like a unified place we can reach consensus on this, or maybe a pointer.
Where do you need to open a chain? Like on like email,
No,
or
I
you're
was just
talking about
no,
GitHub,
like
or
on what's it called? It's Magician or the Discord channel.
um sure. I guess which
No, I was
one
just trying to like so that we don't
so
if
it
the
doesn't
discussion
like die.
happens,
I
yes,
think I'll be
that's what.
yeah. I think we're scheduled to meet with light clients fairly soon, probably. So I think we can just like coordinate like just meeting just to like get everything straight and like figured out. Yeah. I think I'll
Mm,
handle that. It's okay. Yeah.
okay. So based on that, I think we are like 5 minutes extra time. And I wanted to actually walk through something with Felix. I think I'll have to like create a trend for that also. And I might tag it to it. There's some like open and stealth PRs and issues I would like to walk through with you so that we'll
Yeah,
be
let's
able to
go
figure
through it.
out um are you okay doing it now? I'm just looking at the time. We have like 5 minutes
It's
left.
okay. I mean, yeah, I mean, this is part of the agenda. We got a bit lost in the whole discussion, but I think it was also kind of necessary after the big update that we pushed to discuss this, uh, because it affects the error code so much. That's why I think it was very helpful to talk it over. Um, let's go through the through the PRs that you have.
Some are here in this other issue I opened.
Yeah. So the stalled, are we talking about the stalled PRs or are you talking about the
Yeah, the stored PRs.
mm, Yeah, 1 second. I think it might be good if I share my screen for this and then we can click through them. 1 second. I just have to figure out my tabs here. There we go. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so here is the agenda. First one. Oh, sorry, maybe we should open in tab back. Sorry. Here. Okay, so first one. GraphQL test cases from Hive. I don't fully. I mean, this is somewhat unrelated. This is about the GraphQL tests. This PR is trying to basically make it so the GraphQL tests are also in line. The problem is that the GraphQL tests in general are very outdated, and I think we can't really. We can basically only just close this. The other problem is that the GraphQL API in general is a bit unmaintained right now. I mean, nobody is really looking into any issues there, and it kind of has it has the parallel tooling to the RPC, but we are not really actively, I mean, we maintain the endpoint and Geth, but I don't think anyone really uses it. So I would say this thing, I mean, it was nice, but realistically, I think the next step for us is just to remove the GraphQL. I don't think we're really maintaining it.
Were you able to
So,
get any stats on usage before, just like a casual query on GraphQL on the endpoints and code out there? Just curious.
I mean, we don't have any telemetry in the client, so we cannot actually check if anyone's using it. So the
Oh,
way
I
we
just meant on GitHub. Like, so one of the approaches we took was to look back over the last 3 years through commit messages for whether or not someone was using the code. And it kind of gives you back a cursory stat that like, oh, no one's at least made a PR that
Yeah,
mentions
I
this.
mean, we can check. We can definitely check if someone is
Excuse me.
using it. Yeah, but I just think it's pretty unlikely. So let's go to the next. Like this GraphQL thing, we have to figure out some other time. So we can, from my point of view, we can also go like a couple minutes over. Like it's okay because we have to go through these things. So next one is this default location. I have no idea. This is again very old. Someone is trying to define the canonical location of the engine API. I think this ship has kind of sailed. This was supposed to be in the initial spec, but it never really happened. And I think now it's kind of like we would have to bring it up on ACD. I mean, it has come up on ACD a couple times before, but nobody has really been in a position to say, yeah, we have to do this. And I feel like the RPC standards is kind of the wrong forum to make this call because ultimately this has to be implemented inside of the consensus layer clients and inside of the execution clients. And it's not like an API change, just like a config change. So we have to bring it up on ACD again. I think that's the next step for this one. Same with the next one about the secret. It's also just like an engine API config thing. TX pool, standardization. Yeah. It's a big topic. So this one would require us to go through the basically it just adds a bunch of methods. I think we have to figure out this something where we would have to create like an EIP. So this would be the next step for this one because it has to be discussed in the same way that all the other new methods. It's basically adding new methods to the spec, and as far as I understand, these methods are not really implemented. in any client. So we would have to figure this out. I'm not really seeing too many comments. I mean, there's this guy. I think he's in the BISU client, but we would have to bring it up more formally to really make a decision on that. Yeah, we have to check the logs of the call to see how that went. Same with the receipt proof is also something. Yeah, like all of these PRs are just stuck because they are spec changes that have to go through the process, and they haven't really gone through the process. So, yeah, I don't really know what we can do to these PRs to make them unstuck. Basically, clients have to come on the call to discuss these methods and come to a decision. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's how.
So I have a question. So let's say I decide to like take this up to ACDE or ACDT, anyone. Then how do I like continue the process? If by some miracle they decide to go with any of them, do I need to open a fresh PR or do I need to tag the authors of the PR? Because it's been long and then I'm not sure how available they will be to continue the discussion or to continue the work actually in case of any PR changes or some light work on the PR itself.
So the way I see it is that you have actually been really good at this process. If you occasionally come on ACD and propose one of these things, the main thing is it's good to occasionally remind the clients that there are open proposals on the RPC. And if you put it just right, where you're like, hey, you know what, guys, I have this little proposal. Can you just vote on it right now? Chances are it works. We saw that last time with the thing where they added the what was it? It was the block timestamp. I think we can see it here. So I would say this is an example where this approach worked really well. So basically this was opened, someone put it on you had it on the RPC standards. We discussed it a little bit. At some point you mentioned it in the ACDE, and then more people came and gave their statement. And then it was pretty clear at some point that, yeah, I mean, we can just merge this because every client just gave their statement. And it's just like, I think in this particular case, you did a really good job of just like pinging the clients once in ACDE, and that was enough to make everyone vote. If we come with 10 proposals, they're not really going to vote. But if we come with like, let's say one proposal per ACDE, where we're always going to say, hey, you know what, guys, here's a little proposal, just vote on that right now. And I think that way we can make progress through these proposals. At the same time, I would say that it might also make sense to start fresh with these proposals and not try to revive the old PR, especially because all of these old PRs are somehow, first of all, they require rebasing in some cases, but also sometimes they are just, yeah, I mean, it's just like they have a lot of baggage. And if someone comes to this PR, they will be really confused because this PR, for example, has like 20 comments on it. So we're not really expecting people to read the comments. What we're expecting from the clients on ACD is to go to this page, check out the new spec and say, oh yeah, that looks reasonable. We could implement that, and then give their vote. So I think it makes sense for us to basically just recreate these PRs again in a way where they can be applied. And then in this case, for example, also they wouldn't really need these script changes anymore. Maybe, or I don't know, we have to see how that all works out. But basically, and also maybe we wouldn't add the tests right away. We would just add the methods and then come up with the tests later. So that way we would have a really small PR that they can just give a quick glance, and then we can get to somewhere. And then for some things, if there are larger changes, we may even want to consider creating like an EIP. But I don't think it really makes sense to try and like ping these authors who did something years ago and to try to get them to continue the work on that PR.
Okay, thank you. I'll try and like make a proper list and then start introducing them one after the other. But I have to like make fresh PRs for them, then I will start introducing them one after the other. But before then, when I do a PR, I'll tag it to it so that you can take a look. Then for the next ACDH for that week, we'll kind of like I'll ask for client's opinion on it. That's
Yeah,
great.
that's great. I think that way we will actually make some progress. And I mean, you can, when you recreate the PR, you can also just make a link to the old PR saying that basically this is a resubmission of these changes that were proposed earlier. So if people are interested, they can take a look. But I don't think people are really interested in digging through all of this old stuff. Like this is they are basically don't really have the time for that or not the capacity.
Oh, great. We made some progress over here. And I'm hoping by this we can reduce some PRs and then some issues also. Mm, I don't know if there's any other thing because this is all I have from my end. Adeboye and Ahmad. This is I think my first time seeing you guys here.
Knowing how Ethereum works.
Yeah. So apologies on the camera front. Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Built
Yeah.
for people who
Yeah.
are interested in
Oh,
becoming
cool. Yeah. So I think it's not my first time, but I haven't really. I've kind of just joined like a fly on the wall on like maybe one or two other calls. But anyway, just to introduce myself. My name is Ahmad Wilson. I've been in this space for quite a bit. Started mining and validating back in the day. I'm currently head of infrastructure at OTIM Labs. We're a Web3 company built on top of EIP 7702, so account delegation. And so really into orchestrators, have worked just again being in infrastructure and dealt with a lot of client deployments and whether or not they're validator nodes, execution layer clients, clients across all the different types of EVMs, even Solana, Bitcoin. So most of my experience really revolves around that. Let me turn this down. Sorry, you guys. I'm also hopping into the protocol studies like study group cohort or so that's beginning today. So that's pretty sweet there. But yeah, I'll wrap it up. Have been pretty committed to the Ethereum ecosystem for quite a bit. Have worked within the system within the space for quite a bit as well, and I'm looking to hopefully become a regular to this call and contribute where I can. And just like with before when we were talking about the spec generation, excuse me, the spec versioning, and then also the error spec generation. Those are things right up my alley. That's kind of what you would think like CI/CD, DevOps, infrastructure. Those are things that we do. We handle quite a bit for APIs for microservices, for example, or different types of services. So yeah, looking forward to learn more and work with you guys more. Hopefully, you'll see me on calls regularly, and then I'll quickly add. I posted in the chat that I'm always up for a walkthrough. So Felix, Zane, Mercy, Simpson, Raj, any of you guys, if you're up for it, I'm super cool with just like sending you a DM or so to walk through like some of the more fundamental, like at least starting with like the more fundamental base tools and processes, just so I can get more familiar. But yeah, I'll definitely always appreciate it anytime that people would be willing to invest. But yeah, I'll wrap it up right there. Thanks, you guys.
Okay. Thanks for the introduction, and it's a pleasure having you here, and also hoping for you to contribute more and then attend more calls with us. And so I think that's from my end. Are we calling it a wrap? Is there any other thing? Thank you, Felix, for the pointers and then for always being here. And also, okay, I think that's all for today. See you guys next 2 weeks, probably. I'll make a list. I'll do a course summary for what we discussed today, and then for the backlogs and for the versioning we talked about and the website issue we highlighted as a blocker for this. And that's all from my end. Thank you guys for joining. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.
Felix.
Bye, guys.
Peace.
Bye.